Cool. Okay, so I think we're recording, which is great. We haven't started the stage yet. We can do that. Derek, if you want to join the stage, you can do that now too, if you want. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, so I guess I'll start the stage now. Oh, I forgot I have to write the stage topic. Monthly, and we'll get started. Cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's Radicle Governance Working Group meeting. We're going to get started right now. We have a packed agenda today, so let's see. Hopefully people will start trickling in and we'll have enough time to get to everything. So I'll start off with a quick reminder of what this meeting is. This is the monthly meeting for the Radicle Governance Working Group. The Radicle Governance Working Group is a community-led group for coordinating and stewarding radical governance. This includes all things related to the Radicle Treasury and other radical governance topics. Right now, it's being moderated by me, Shelby, who will be introducing herself today, Derek and Larry. And so this meeting is meant to go through kind of any activity that has happened in the governance forum over the last month, discuss and support the coordination of next steps by empowering specific working groups and proposal leaders, so we can move into another month of governing, if you will. So I wanted to just do a quick call out before we get started with our agenda about how to engage with this. So we have an agenda today. We're going to be going through a bunch of different temperature checks that were started by different community members. I've requested that those community members join the call today. So when we pass it off to your temperature check or your discourse post, I'd ask you just to raise your hand and then we can bring you to the stage. For everybody else, for people who aren't presenting or discussing a temperature check that they posted or a proposal that they've been working on, if you'd like to chat, just feel free to introduce yourself and write what you'd like to chat about in the working group text channel, just so we can know you. And when you raise your hand, we're able to bring you to the stage. Unfortunately, we get kind of some spammers who raise their hands and want to get added to the stages. So just introduce yourself and give us a heads up about what you want to talk to. So that's kind of just like the operational stuff. As I mentioned, we're going to go through all the different temperature checks today, discuss some progress on previous temperature checks that have been posted, and introduce some new folks. So without further ado, let's get started with kind of an update from the Radicle Governance Working Group itself. Also, someone said, can people hear this? Seems like some people can't hear this. Derek and Shelby, can you guys hear what I'm saying?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. Can anybody else not hear? Seems like boredom, maybe this is a you issue, but I'm not sure if anybody else is having issues. Okay, great. Then it's maybe a you issue, boredom. Sorry about that. Cool. So first, I would like to give an update from the Radicle Governance Working Group itself. So over the last month, we've seen a need to start supporting not only the working group itself, but also kind of this growing governing community with more facilitation, more operational support. And so we've actually brought on Shelby, who's going to be introducing herself, so I won't speak too much on her, but she's awesome. She's going to be joining us actually as a governance facilitator, so supporting the governance working group with everything from capturing our notes, making sure proposal leads are pushing work forward, supporting working groups, coordinating within the community. So she's going to be joining us now, starting this month. So she'll be kind of on stage with us here, and so working on a bunch of different things. So Shelby, I'll pass it over to you to do a quick introduction and let everybody know what you're going to be working on.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for the intro. Super, super pumped to not only be a part of Radicle, but also joining and speaking at my first monthly working group call. As Abby mentioned, I am joining as the governance facilitator. A bit kind of background about me. I'm from the US, but been living in Berlin for 4 years. Currently studying a student of public policy here. And if you're curious for more information, I dropped a little intro actually in the general channel like 2 weeks ago. Or a week ago. So if you want to check that out, that's there. My kind of goals and purpose in the governance facilitation or facilitator role are mainly going to be focusing on, like Abby said, kind of streamlining communication and coordination within the Radicle Governance Working Group and the community in general. Also brainstorming some ways to stimulate stakeholder engagement and also just community growth. And then also, as she mentioned, to kind of conceptualizing a way, like an accountability structure for our working group too, to keep pushing projects forward and making sure we are on track with all of the amazing things that everybody wants to do, which is super exciting to see all of the proposals and the conversations that happened this last month on the forum. One of those things, as Abby mentioned also, that I'll be doing is taking and collecting notes from working group calls, which are, and finding a kind of a better way maybe to format those for everyone and make them more accessible. They're currently housed, just as an FYI for everyone, they're currently housed in a thread on the Radicle Governance Working Group post on the community forum. But we're thinking about changing that and making it more accessible, as I mentioned, but we'll keep you folks updated there and let everybody know where those notes will be. So yeah, and yeah, I guess Abby, I don't know if you wanted me to go into any more detail there. Otherwise, I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think you'll definitely see a bunch of Shelby's work on the forum, and it'll be really great to have someone who's heads down focused on helping us keep things organized and focused. So very excited to have you on board, Shelby. Thank you so much for the intro. So moving ahead with the agenda, Boredom, maybe if you want to raise your hand, I can bring you to the stage. I want to start talking through some of the activity that we had on the forums this past month. We've had a bunch of temperature checks, but we actually have started moving one of those temperature checks forward into the next phase of governance. This is related to the first temperature check that the Radicle Governance Working Group put forth, which was for the creation of a Radicle Grants program. Since last month, we passed the temperature check for the grants program, collected amazing feedback. Thank you everybody for joining the discussion there. And we've also put out a job description basically for a grants lead, someone to lead the Radicle Grants program, not only manage it, but also help take over the creation of the program and push the proposal through. We had a couple applications. The Radicle Working Group took some interviews, and we ended up bringing on Boredom, who is a well-known Radicle community member, to take over and lead the Radicle Grants program moving forward. So Boredom, I'll pass it off to you to give an intro and also give an update on where the Radicle Grants program proposal is in governance right now, and maybe a little a sneak peek of the structured discussion that you just posted on Discourse.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'll just give a quick intro about sort of like why I came to be really interested in doing this work. So I used to live in Berlin, so you can guess I probably know a few people on the Radicle team. I had heard about it, and it really piqued my interest. I studied economics in university. But professionally, I've been doing data science and engineering for the past 6 years or so. And sort of professionally, something I love working on is just sort of organizing work and optimizing my workflows. So I'm kind of got a sort of rabid curiosity for automation, and I also still like to think about incentives and game theory and things I liked to study in university. So that sort of nerdy aspect hasn't really left me. So yeah, so you can kind of imagine if that's where I'm coming from. When I saw Radicle, it just really was something that I found very intellectually interesting. And so I've been very active on the community. And when I saw this job posting, I thought, I mean, that this is definitely one of the kinds of ways I'd like to get involved most. So as Abbey said, there was sort of a call out to see if anyone wanted to apply. So I did that, and we've just posted today sort of the next stage, which is a formal discussion around the grants program. So you would have seen that in Discord on the governance posts that get there, and I'll blast this out to a few of you afterwards. But basically, I just kind of go through the vision I have, at least for the next 6 months, and I think that it's somewhat high level. I think some of what I've written may be subject to change, sort of depending on what kind of feedback we get. But the gist of it, right, is that we want to set up a team, a multi-sig, and so I'll end up kind of reaching out individually or to various groups on Discord to see who can be part of that. And the idea is really just to start getting Radicle taking some steps towards progressive decentralization, so that people who are contributing to and sort of working on the governance of Radicle are from sort of the outside of the current core team. Yeah, this I think if you go through what I've written up, it kind of goes over a lot of nitty gritty details, but it's really just the main goal for me is to make sure that I contribute to that decentralization Radicle. So making sure that like the team can grow, but also people who are contributing from outside. And I think a really exciting thing is going to be making this a model for all DAOs. So just sort of, I think like LA had talked about this in his like 2021 post, that, that part of the goal is to make sure that when people think about collaborating with code and with governance, that they think about Radicle first. And so having a grants program, which is inherently about sort of building open source work together, we're sort of building the software to do that. So I see it kind of hopefully turning into something that has a really nice virtuous cycle, whereby the work we're doing to open source the contributions to Radicle feed back into Radicle and make the platform that much better. So yeah, that's just a quick intro I wanted to give. It's really nice to be working more and more with this project. And for the foreseeable future, I will still be in and on, and I'm sorry about that. So that's it for now, but definitely take a look, and feedback welcome. Please poke holes everywhere.
Cool, thanks so much, Boredom. Yeah, as Boredom said, this is the time for feedback for those who aren't familiar with the Radicle Governance process. This is the second phase of governance, so it's successfully passed the temperature check. Now we're moving into, basically it's like a drafted proposal, with the next step being an official snapshot poll, and then the step after that being an on-chain proposal for voting. So we're collecting feedback for this proposal over the next week. So please, if you're interested in contributing feedback, please chime into the discourse forum by next week, Wednesday, October 20th. Again, like the details, Boredom did a great job of starting to flesh out everything from process, but also to, how we want to dog food Radicle. But things are totally subject to change, so don't get bogged down in the details. But there's a lot of different open questions here about budget, about timing. And so I think it'll be great to get everybody's thoughts who are interested in this, because this is definitely going to be a really awesome program to see in the Radicle ecosystem. So we definitely want to make it as great as possible. So cool. And again, feel free to ping Boredom with any questions that you have regarding the proposal. And we'll keep dropping updates in this working group channel as well. Cool. Awesome. Great. So moving on, I want to pass it off to Nassar, if you're around, to kind of chat through your temperature check that you posted to the forum regarding the growth workstream. So Nassar took lead on putting together some thoughts that were shared in the first working group call, if I remember correctly, around how we can be deploying the Radicle Treasury to support adoption, increase awareness, and just grow the Radicle ecosystem outside specifically of grants. And I think that this is a really awesome temperature check, really great initiative here. Nassar, I would love for you to run through it. And then Alexi and LA, both of you guys posted temperature checks that I think are very closely related to this work stream. So maybe I'll bring you guys on after as well, and we can kind of have a general discussion around how those temperature checks fit in with the growth work stream as well. But Nassar, I'll pass it off to you to share your thoughts and update the community on your progress.
It's called the sound is different when you're up on stage, which is interesting. Thanks for that intro. As kind of Abbey mentioned, on the last governance call, we agreed that we needed to kind of have an approach for funding the growth initiatives via the Treasury, and with the DAO very much focused on driving initial adoption. I felt it was kind of important for key components of our go-to-market kind of being supported by those funded initiatives, and I wanted to kind of lay out the go-to-market strategy. So those the proposals for initiatives that we should be funding are focused. And so I'm just kind of going through and giving a summary of basically that post, which is one important component is that we're focused on a few segments and use cases in terms of product development across teams, and that's kind of, I think, a key component that we need to think through when we're thinking about our go-to-market and the initiatives that are funded to support that. And the second thing that was very much that we need to think about kind of product development, network seeding, and the growth initiatives as kind of things that we need to think about being in sync with one another. In order to kind of add enough value to the users to earn kind of meaningful adoption. And then I guess I finally kind of suggested very top level metrics that we could use to guide us as we kind of get all the pieces together. The community, and again, I'm not sure, Abby, what the best format for kind of giving these updates are, but that's kind of the summary of the temperature check, and then I guess the community appreciate all the responses. Boredom and LA kind of made notes on the metrics, which you guys can see there, and then the Panos kind of mentioned maybe a focus on onboarding new DAOs and not just existing DAOs, and I think those are things we can kind of dive further into. And then in terms of next steps, I guess what we maybe can start now looking at maybe this in the next month or so is kind of initiative proposals, and maybe we need to create a template around that for having people propose initiatives. I guess I would argue that Ella and Alexi's kind of temp checks were more potentially growth initiatives, because they were both kind of thinking about blockers to growth. So I'm not sure if those are temp checks or initiatives, something we should think about. And then I was actually just speaking to the Rarible Protocols lead, who said that he was interested in token swaps between treasuries, and maybe that falls into it. And so yeah, I think the next steps for us are very much working out a template and a format for initiative proposals that kind of fit into the temperature check, which was a broad overview of kind of the approach we should be taking to them.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thought that I think is, I think that is like the best next step to figure out, which is kind of how you want to formulate this growth work stream. And if it's similar to the grants program, and a multi-sig that's being funded via the Treasury that then in turn funds initiatives, or if it is like very similar to the grants program, you could think, whereas people are proposing growth initiatives that potentially like need some funding, and then it's just being funded in a more ad hoc way via multi-sig to initiative instead of initiative directly to Treasury. So like that's one way to organize it. Or it would be maybe more in charge of like supporting proposals that are related to growth. And then the proposals would still go through like the temperature check thing. I think that with the two proposals for like, I think that removing the name registration fee with Alexi, we can chat about next, is a smart contract change. Like, so that actually has to go through formal governance, but for ones that are about funding and like deploying the Radicle Treasury to fund growth initiatives, we could potentially create and present a new structure for this little, you know, committee, kind of like a growth committee that can manage itself and fund different initiatives that are related to taking capital and use it to support growth and adoption within the Radicle ecosystem, which is a really interesting idea. And it could also follow the same framework that Boredom's presented for Radicle grants. If everybody takes a look at, you'll see this really cool diagram in the structured discussion, in that we use and dog food Radicle orgs to manage, you know, these different repositories of information and, you know, track where the funding is going. And so you could easily see a growth org being formed that has a relationship with the Radicle Treasury that people are applying or presenting or proposing growth initiatives to, which is a really cool idea.
Yeah, I'm kind of easy. The way my kind of thinking right now is I like the way kind of Ellie and Lexi kind of just proposed things that we need to remove as blockers. I'm keen to keep things loose for now, if I'm honest. But perhaps that's not as effective for driving community engagement. So I guess I'm looking for you guys to kind of direct on that.
It potentially could make it looser or easier, because instead of each growth initiative going through a full governance process, 4 stages over the course of a certain amount of time, 2 votes, 1 snapshot, 1 official, it could be more of, again, like an ad hoc, the growth multi-sig makes a decision via a snapshot and things could potentially move quicker. So just as a thought, but I definitely agree with you, like kind of removing blockers and trying to make sure that we can support different metrics. So I think it'd also be cool to do a reevaluation of what those metrics are. And if we were to have this kind of like growth multi-sig or growth workstream, have that be defined by clear metrics that you could use to evaluate proposals off of. But cool. Maybe LA, do you want to chime in here? Maybe raise your hand and we can bring you to the stage. Alexi, you can too if you're interested. And then we can kind of talk through about how we want to move these 2 specific growth initiatives / proposals forward.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, the idea for the registration fee change is pretty straightforward. In terms of the rationale, it's explained in the temperature check, but it's basically to reduce friction, to avoid having to, so users currently have to exchange some ETH or some whatever for some RAD before they can register. That's a point of friction, and the RAD doesn't actually really contribute to the the token economics, and therefore the proposal is to just set the fee to 0. to avoid this step for users. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of breath because I just ran up the stairs. Yeah, and moving it forward, I think is again also straightforward. It's in terms of running this on chain. It's a single method call. We could combine it with an existing or with another proposal to kind of not waste the whole voting process and everything. If there is another governance proposal that's ready to be proposed on chain. Otherwise, it can be proposed on its own. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Well,
Okay, for me too. Oh, go ahead, Abby.
no.
I was about to say that it would be nice to actually go through snapshot polls for both, and then eventually, like the final proposal on the token holders potentially, could be merged. Yeah, Alex, on your point.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to merge these two in the on-chain proposal, but they should go through kind of separate snapshots, maybe, and structured discussion. So the next step for both would be to, they've been up for a while, so I think that we can move them into the next stage. So it's all about coordinating who wants to take the next step, similar to what Boredom did. Of course, the Radicle Grants proposal is like way more in depth, and these are more simple proposals, so it probably won't take too much time or require that much detail to draft a proposal for these two temperature checks, but there's a template for it with a couple of requirements and criteria that need to be met that whoever wants to lead the proposal now moving forward can take a first stab at, and then this can take collect feedback for like 3 to 5 days, I think is the time frame that's suggested, and then it can move into the snapshot poll phase, since we're moving through like the formal governance with this. So I'm wondering who is going to take lead on it. Ellie and Alexi, you are both respectively the proposal authors, and so is there, will you have capacity over the next couple of days to kind of take a stab at this drafted proposal, or are you looking for community members to support there?
I can do it on my side, for mine.
Yeah, it would be great if a community member could take over. Otherwise, I will do it myself.
Mm-hmm. You have a clear idea of implementation, though, right? And you would probably be doing the technical implementation?
Yeah, exactly.
Then I think that it might be best for you to do it. Again, it's so simple that I think it'll basically be quite quick to do. I can support you with it, and I can just send you like a draft for the first, like with the draft, and then we can take care of it. But just because you're doing the technical implementation, I think it would be best if you take the stab at it.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, great. So LA, you'll take a stab at the discussion. So I think everybody can look out for that, and then we can collect feedback there, which will be great.
Sounds good.
It seems like you have kind of it seems like everything got figured out, like how many orgs you want to support reimbursing and how we'll do that. I think just also in this proposal, making a proposal for who's responsible for governing this process. And maybe that's something that you and Nassar chat about, or all three of us, about who's going to be kind of coordinating this and managing it will be, I think, an important next step for this proposal.
Yep, sounds good. I think that there were a lot of great comments on the thread. I think starting simple with a 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5 multisig, and then basically starting with something like, let's subsidize the first 1,000 orgs and then see what happens, right? And then of course we can do this again, but that would be already a good enough sample that will give us confidence on like what's going on, how the process looks like, and also drive more adoption of the feature.
Cool, awesome. And then Nassar, I'll leave it to you to think of where you want to take this growth workstream next. It could be taking it into like a drafted proposal for funding a growth multi-sig. It could just be proposing something off-chain and just using this temperature check as a place to kind of like capture your thoughts here. But I think it'll be cool to start ruminating on, as we see these proposals that are related to basically growth initiatives, how we would want to see these push through governance in the future. And so we can use this process as kind of like a, I guess, like a sounding board for what more modular entity we might want to create around growth and stuff.
Cool. Sounds good.
Great. Awesome. Anything else regarding growth or awareness? Anybody in the community? Any questions? I don't see any in the chat. Anything that anybody wants to discuss? No? Okay, cool. So now I'll pass it off to Derek. Derek is created a temperature check that regarding like treasury management around should Radicle be earning yields off of its stablecoin balances in the treasury. So Derek, I'll pass it off to you to talk about that temperature check and also address some of the proposals that we've had and discussions we've had around treasury management as well.
Thanks, Abbey. I think most of you have seen this, but there's been some recent discussion in the forums and in the Discord around what Radicle should do with its stablecoin balance. So there's a $20 million USDC balance in the treasury. It's currently just sitting there. Nothing's really happening. There's different ways to deploy it, to fund growth initiatives, to fund grants. It could be deposited into DeFi protocols to earn some yield, put some capital to work to offset these expenses. So I put together a temp check, basically outlining the pros and cons to earning some yield with this. And the pros are like yields are pretty solid, right? Somewhere anywhere between 3 to 6% for the most simple passive strategies on simply depositing on Compound or Aave, which is orders of magnitude higher than just depositing it into a checkings account. So it can meaningfully offset expenses, right? Like if grants costs like $200,000-$300,000 a quarter, and like depositing $10 million from the USDC can meaningfully offset that expense. In the grand scheme, though, these aren't huge amounts relative to what Radicle has raised in the past, or the Rad Treasury itself, right? In terms of there's a huge proportion of Rad tokens that the Treasury has. So Radicle's still early, and this Treasury stuff, it's cool, and I think it is important to try and to experiment with, because in the future these programs could become much larger. But it's also recognizing the fact that it's not a priority, just candidly, relative to something like growth, and that should be the core focus right now. So I go back and forth on it. I think there are some good lessons and good reasons to try this on a smaller scale with and just at the minimum see if it's working, and if there's other things that come up in the future where the USDC has to be spent to get users to go to protocol, that should sort of take precedent. So I'll open it up to the floor if anyone has some feel strongly one way or another. We also are bringing on Joyce from Grow Protocol. She recently posted a temp check as well, on a similar vein, basically on whether Radicle should use Grow Protocol as a product to earn yield in a higher yield, de-risk manner. So I'll let Joyce talk a little bit about sort of her feelings about this topic and what Grow does. And yeah, anyone else can jump in afterwards. Joyce, do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for having me here. And I think that, Derek, I think you have captured the pros and cons very well in the temperature check that you have already posted. So I don't think I'll go further into those pros and cons, I think one thing to say is that it is a very good problem to have, to say that we are sitting on 20 million that has definitely, could support a lot of growth in the future, and how to turn it more into a way that self-sustaining, not just self-sustaining, but also growing so that it supports even more initiatives would definitely be something, as you said, not a top priority, could be something that will be helpful in the long run though. I would say, I think Compound and Aave are both very solid choices. And I know 4%, again, it is a good amount to actually look into. I would say where we are seeing is that there are two folds for treasury management in diversification in general. One is that you have already had a good portion in stablecoins, and so that is already one step ahead of other DAOs. And in stablecoins, I think one thing to consider is whether you want to have all on USDC the problem, then do you want to make sure you have eggs in different baskets at that point? Although noted, that is not exactly a very high risk at the moment. It would be more like a high impact tail risk. So I think those might be something to consider if you want to further diversify within the stablecoin. And then outside stablecoin, there's always questions of how to diversify so that it's not all in one token, that you will also make sure that you capture the more is not capturing upside, I would say it's more defending against the downside in case the token price drops. Excuse me. Sorry, I've been coughing. I promise that's not COVID. I just tested negative. Not that it will matter to anyone in the room because it's all virtual, just to put it out there. Cool, I just want to pause here. I feel like I spoke quite a bit. Happy to talk more about Grow if that's helpful, but also want to bear in mind that this is a conversation more about whether we should do more with the USDC per se. So I could stop here and maybe see if anyone got questions.
Yeah, maybe some just to comment on what Derek and you have said. From my perspective, the main risk or the main cost is creating an on-chain governance proposal. So we may all agree that having a stablecoin sit in a treasury, not doing anything, not earning yield, is a pretty big opportunity cost. But the next step would be to actually create an on-chain proposal to move part of that to Compound or Aave or Grow, and that's where the risk and the cost is. So we would have to have someone who can do that credibly. The proposal would have to be reviewed by multiple people and tested, audited, that sort of thing, because it's going to be handling a fair bit of money, right? So that's just the biggest risk and cost is losing the money by just messing up the proposal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's valid. I think that's very valid. I think like any upgrades or even simple proposals through governance, there's always going to be an element of uncertainty. So it's just about minimizing that. Like we saw what happened with Compound 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I think depending on how people feel, it definitely requires some coordination and technical cost. So.
And I guess it's also figuring out like when to prioritize it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's something that will kind of keep bubbling until we see the direct need to, or we what is it called? Or find the right people to kind of create a strategy around it. I do think that it's something that requires a strategy, and I also think that it's something that requires a lot of expertise, like you said, Alexi, like the opportunity cost of kind of just moving something through to move it through is potentially higher than the benefit that we get from kind of just starting with something, and it seems like it needs maybe some more dedicated thought, like probably a work stream, and then, you know, probably people who can work on a very secure and effective implementation. And so I'd be really interested to bring those people into the circle. It seems like the core team right now is focused on growth and grants and coordinating around that. And so I feel like that there won't be a lot of focus within our, you know, either the internal team or like the governance working group, because we have these two big initiatives being pushed forward. But I'd be very interested in trying to figure out if there's people that we can bring in to kind of coordinate the strategy around treasury management. And that's something that I feel like I'd be interested in supporting personally.
I could share a bit more on what I saw from other DAOs. I agree with you. I think in terms of the safety of that transportation of money, what we see most recently, we were working with Olympus DAO. I think they're using Gnosis Safe. That sounds like one that has been quite credible, and so might be good to look into. But to your point, Abbey, about a more overall strategy, Pool Together has recently worked with Llama DAO to come up with a treasury management, like a strategy report, and trying to talk about how exactly their treasury positions are today and what some other options there might be for considering how to diversify and different options if you want to choose to diversify. I think those might be good ways to start looking at this more systematically if this is something, you know, you feel like one is interesting, but two, the core team doesn't have bandwidth to do it, and three, you might also want to have someone who has done it a few times, and ideally not with vested interest to look into it, so to give you the most objective opinions over it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that input.
Added note that I was speaking to Chandler at UMA Protocol yesterday, and I believe they're working on things around this as well. Chandler, if you want to comment, then feel free to stick your hand up and kind of maybe talk a little bit about the stuff you guys are doing in this.
Cool. Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to chat.
Apologies.
This is fine. This is just a hangout. No worries if you don't want to. You also don't have to.
Yeah,
but
you don't
would love to hear about what you guys are doing.
No worries. More than happy to chat. Hey Joyce, great to connect with you. Actually, funny enough, Joyce and I have a call tomorrow. So just small world in DeFi. Sorry if I might have missed some of the context on what you guys have been chatting about, but a quick rundown of what we're doing at UMA is really just building financial contract templates that on the DAO treasury management side can enable DAOs to set terms for trading their native token for other asset types. So, if you think about DeFi, you've got teams and blue chip teams that have these billion-dollar balance sheets, and they can't do much with them because they can't necessarily sell their token. They need to raise capital to be able to pay developers, bounty programs. These DAOs need to actually have operating costs. So we created these two token types, one called the range token and one called the success token, which takes some of the traditional finance concept terms of debt financing, so taking a loan out against your balance sheet, or equity financing, where you trade off some of your tokens now that unlock in the later date. So very much like a VC type styled structure. And so our treasury management solutions are really just there to help DAOs either sell some of their tokens now for cash or different types of assets, which we find is quite an interesting play. Another way we kind of think about it is that if there are two DAOs that are they have mutually beneficial relationships, and they form a pipeline and an ecosystem, you can use these treasury management tools to swap. You don't necessarily swap the token; you swap the these tokenized payout functions, or the range token and success token, and ultimately you have like this upside exposure on someone that like within the ecosystem, like if they succeed, you succeed as well. So like we found, these tools are quite useful for just like allowing DeFi to be a bit more functional.
Thanks, Chandler. Yeah, I've spent some time with Hart from UMA about the range token stuff and followed some of the initial attempts. So it's been, I think super neat product to help treasuries diversify. It's another option compared to simply selling assets. So yeah, super interesting and big fan of what you guys are working on.
Perhaps, Abby, maybe you can advise. Maybe a good step is a proposal being written by the UMA side or in our Radicle community for an approach.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think that this is the move with this. While we, as in Radicle Governance Working Group and community, are trying to figure out when to prioritize this larger, I guess, piece of strategy work, which is like how we're managing the Radicle Treasury. I think that what is really helpful is to see structured proposals from, I guess, like service providers or solutions, you know what I mean? People who have solutions to do treasury management, so we can start logging them and evaluating them internally in the forums, right? So that when it comes to the point where we're like, okay, we're ready to activate, a working group around treasury management, we know we have basically the log of all the solutions and we can kind of just go right into execution mode. And so I think, like Joyce, what you did with your Grow proposal was really great, because now we have that logged and we can keep syncing, async through the working group, but also like monthly on kind of like where the treasury management, when it will be prioritized. And Chandler, like seeing that from UMA, and I know that like some other people in the ecosystem have been interested in kind of putting forth a proposal for this as well. Having these proposals just there that we can log and keep track of is super helpful, because I think that it will also help us evaluate kind of, what are our plans and what are the scope of our plans with treasury management with regards to Radicle.
Awesome. By the way, I will make sure I post also the links for the things I mentioned earlier. So then hopefully it helps just put together the structure of how to step through the consideration of the treasury management. If that might be something helpful for everyone to get on the same page, or whether it's just to browse through some of the options they mentioned. I'm pretty sure UMA's range token is on it. Grow isn't on it, so I don't have vested interest to promoting this report. Just want to make sure that everyone might be able to reference it for the structure itself.
Cool. Sounds great. So Derek, I think that you've been kind of moving conversations forward regarding treasury management, and so maybe like a good action item over the next month is to kind of think about proposals that are coming through, like create the space for creating more, I guess, strategic conversation about when we want to prioritize, treasury management discussion, and to keep, either creating new discussions in the Radicle community forum or just continuing the discussion in the thread that you created, and we can kind of like chime in there as we focus and go heads down with getting the grants program through and some of these growth initiatives. Does that sound good?
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a conversation it's an open conversation that I think should be just evaluated and consistently revisited. So
cool. Awesome. Great. Well, so we'll end this because we're also coming up on time. So I want to hit our last agenda topic, which is just kind of like a call out for something that the Radicle Governance Working Group is thinking about, which is how we should structure this community-led group itself. So as we're starting to kind of finally activate the Radicle Treasury, potentially with one of its first allocations, its first distributions. We're also thinking about how the Radicle Treasury could be used to fund the Radicle Governance Working Group. Currently, contributors are funded via the Radicle Foundation, as this is like the entity that we're leveraging to manage kind of, like legal relationships with paid contributors. And so I think that one thing that would be really good to start experimenting with is funding the working group, so it could truly be a community-funded and led working group that's coordinating radical governance, which would probably include developing a budget for the working group, potentially developing some more like operational entity around the working group, maybe backed by like a radical org. And so Larry and Derek have been thinking on this a lot as two of the contributors in the working group. And so we think that it could be cool to potentially have the working group funded via a grant through the grants program, to make it easy. Again, like kind of bundle the allocation forward so it doesn't have to be a separate proposal. But could be really cool to start dog fooding like how we see project development being funded by funding, contributors within the Radicle community via the Radicle Treasury. So I think that that's really exciting, and I think that we're going to be putting some thought into like what that would look like in parallel to the grants program forming. And maybe have a temperature check or a proposal for this sometime in the next month to discuss with the community. But I definitely think that starting to experiment with these like new forms of organization within the community and how we can get people funded via the Treasury would be really cool. A call to action is like people who have experience forming, like legal relationships within DAOs. There's like tons of people in the DAO space who are figuring out how to get people paid via a DAO and how to do that legally and in different jurisdictions. And we've had a couple people reach out with stuff like that as well. But I think that that's going to be like a form of expertise that we need to kind of like move that conversation forward as well. So that's just a note. So maybe look out for that. And I think that that's all the stuff that was on the agenda. So maybe in the last couple of minutes, does anybody else has any questions or items that they'd like to discuss or bring up or raise or support that they need moving their proposals forward? Anything? Anybody in the audience? If you want to raise your hand, you can join the stage to speak. If not, okay, cool. Then I guess we'll end there. Was a lot of stuff to talk about. Very excited, definitely to see radical governance heating up, and the participation in the forums has been really great. So I'm excited to see some more of these structured discussions coming out of these temperature checks. I'm excited to see the next stage of the Radicle Grants program and all of that. So thanks for joining. We'll chat in a month and we'll talk on the internet. Ciao, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining, Joyce and
Bye.
Chandler. Bye.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.